the biggest gallery we've had here. No doubt you're all here for item 8.1, the Cash and Investment Report. It's a cracking read. Look, in all honesty, this is terrific. Thank you so much for the big turn up, which I know most of you are here for 9.1. I'm just wondering if I can get turned down a smidge. I'll go down a bit. It's great to have such a big gallery. So what we're going to speak about first up is the Have Your Say. We have 8 speakers, and the maximum time the speakers can speak for is 5 minutes, and then the councillors can ask them questions. Whilst we have such a big gallery here, and I genuinely think this is great, I just ask you to, maintain decorum. We don't want this becoming a quagmire. So just maintain decorum. If it's all a little bit too much for you, that's okay. Pop outside, walk around the block, come back in. We'll have a great day. So anyway, so welcome to this public forum, which really is an opportunity for the community to address the councillors on matters that are before the council for this particular month. I would like, actually, I have someone to do James is going to. I'd like to call upon the General Manager to...
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. In relation to live streaming, the meeting is also being audio and video recorded, and the recording will be made available on the internet. No other persons are permitted to record the meeting unless specifically authorised by council to do so. In relation to Have Your Say, all speakers are requested to ensure their comments are relevant to the particular agenda item. The chairperson may withdraw the privilege to speak where a speaker makes personal remarks or criticisms or uses abusive or inappropriate language. Speakers do not enjoy any special protection arising from comments made during this forum and should therefore refrain from making defamatory remarks or personal defamatory statements against any individuals. And can we just ask that all mobile phones and laptops be set to silent? Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr General Manager. Well, let's get underway. The first speaker that we have with Have Your Say is Beth White. Will be speaking for item 9.5, the New England Future Fund, Armidale Region.
Thank you. I'm speaking to you from a Guyra chamber, not. But thanks to Melissa for trying to do everything she could to make it possible as per the commitment made to us. The Future Fund is of critical importance. I'm a long-term advocate for responsible expenditure frameworks from renewable energy projects through community benefit funds. I note the Future Fund is currently a concept in principle commitment that is lacking a precise detail and is to its exact composition, its exact structure and its operational format. Yet the proposal to fund the revised format rail trail is hinged on a bypass funding, is presented as a done deal with a specific RE project. New South Wales planning document, Regional Cities, gives the City of Armidale a buffer zone protection from immediate dislocation from renewable energy, wind and solar energy generating works, EGW projects. Therefore, it is very important that the committee structure must be biased towards understanding the needs of the outlying rural sector most exposed to dislocation and inconvenience, thereby to determine the expenditure allocation to the affected rural communities significant to their compensation and remediation. I'm a long-term critic of the trinket scenario in distribution of community benefit funds that I have seen in our northern neighbours and believe in significant legacy projects that are decided by the appropriate committee. But I question the proposal to allocate funds by a predetermined process without the Future Fund, as yet not in existence. How can funds be fairly and responsibly allocated outside the Future Fund framework without the risk of being challenged in court or by injunction? The battery energy storage system project is still at the determination stage in the state planning system. meaning that there is time to set the future fund in place before making a plan. To hinge 20 years of funding without assessment by the future fund mechanism to progress prematurely is contentious, even reckless. Likewise, the future of the line is also in the determination stage. I repeat, to progress prematurely is contentious, even reckless. The pretentious allocation of funds to an unsubstantiated project is indeed reckless. The project that seeks to reinvent or at least reverse the very nature of the original proposition in favour of a city has to be irresponsibly hasty and undermines the point and purpose of the future fund. It seems rail trail advocates anticipate the future fund will rubber stamp this plan into the future. I have been assured that community benefit funds cannot be utilised for normal maintenance. How is normal maintenance of any of council's roads, walking trails, cycle tracks, including the normal maintenance of a rail trail, any different? Your document does specifically define the expenditure as maintenance. Let the future fund do its work. It will be a better place to direct, balance and quite rightly divert the funds as appropriate at the time to projects we want and that are possible in a timely way without the potential fail factor scenario in play when acting prematurely as proposed. To be seen to squeeze in, to construe funding allocations ahead of a fair and honest process dictated by a structured future fund mechanism could be interpreted as at-risk behaviour or acting for self-interest, acting as the corporate business, which you are not. To have the framework for the future fund in place is the best placed position for the next council to commence. The current stitch-up of multiple projects is a rotten final gift from this council term, a risk-averse conundrum, a can of rotten worms, neither to be contemplated nor endorsed. We're all aware that the council election is imminent. To have a meeting the size of today is inappropriately rousing, incomplete, unfinished, improperly rushed items that cannot possibly be given due consideration, each for a responsible outcome. I congratulate any councillor who has read all of the background material and comes adequately prepared, and I forgive those who could not possibly do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Councillors, any questions at all for Ms White? Thank you, Beth. Could I ask Paul McCann to come up? Paul is going to be speaking against item 8.1, which is the cash and investment report.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr Mayor, for letting me speak. My speech is in regard to item 8.1 and is in the form of questions to the Mayor. During one of the SRV forums in 2022, I asked you what guarantee can you give that the extra funds in the SRV will be spent on reducing the maintenance backlog that was mentioned in the council's case for the rate variation. Your reply was, next question. So I asked that question again. What guarantee can you give that the extra funds in the SRV would be spent on reducing the maintenance backlog that was quoted in the council's case for the rate variation? I've also handed you a report, personally handed you a report, highlighting the poor condition of the shared path at another forum. You told me you would hand it to the General Manager. Yet nearly 2 years later and after the first rate rise, nothing has been done apart from a very poor effort to reseal a rough section of the path behind the ex-services club. That was a band-aid fix, which only had the effect of making the bumps and hollows permanent. I was told by a councillor after I mentioned the matter, the repair was standard practice. It seems even the simplest and cheapest repairs, such as draining a section of the path between Falkland and Dangar streets, where water accumulates due to the path being lower than the surrounding grass. All that is required is a trench to be dug and a pipe running towards the creek. It's I'll just restart. Yeah, so why can't ARC do even the simplest and most basic of maintenance tasks? I estimate the cost would be less than $500, not including labour. Aim to Dango Street between the shared path and the creek is also very rough, causing damage to not only bike wheels, but to car wheels and suspensions as well. Is it true that ARC plans to spend $1.8 million on the first stage of the rail trail project, despite there being a motion on the record that the project will be cost neutral? There's also zero enforcement of the rules that require dog owners to control their dogs on the shared path. I observed dogs off-leash well away from the area designated an off-leash area. Dogs are a major hazard to those using the path for its intended original purpose of providing a safe route for urban cyclists to move around town. Some dog owners throw balls on and near the path, and the dog races off blindly, oblivious to any danger to the dog or other users to the path. I have had many near misses involving dogs on the path despite exercising the utmost care approaching them. Council's responsibility is first and foremost to the ratepayers and residents of the local government area. So why is Armidale Regional Council putting a rail trail ahead of essential maintenance to infrastructure ratepayers and residents use every day? It seems ARC's policy to those that choose to ride a bike to work, place of study, church, shops and other appointments is very poor and non-existent in many locations. I urge all councillors not to approve the motions in the next agenda item. Instead, move to have the money spent on repairing and maintaining essential infrastructure ratepayers and residents use every day to get to work, shops, church and places of study. At present, those that choose to ride bikes around town are getting a very poor return on their rates. The rail trail as proposed will not deliver any real benefits to the majority of ratepayers and residents. Money for the rail trail should be spent on reducing the backlog of maintenance issues, and the Mayor should be lobbying both the federal and New South Wales governments to allow that to occur. Sections of the shared path are in such a poor condition as more like what one would expect to find in a third world country. On the matter of investments, that is fine as long as sufficient money is allocated for essential services and maintenance. It is clear that is not happening. How would one feel if they contracted a builder to build a new home
30 seconds.
and the builder invested the money paid by the client instead of building them their home? Investments should only occur after essential projects are completed. Might be allowed to under the Local Government Act, but not to excess. Any investment should be for money saved from projects delivered on time and under budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCann. Just if you could stay there might be a few questions for you.
Yes,
look, as you posed a couple to me, some of these I am able to address, some I can't. I think the first one that you came with was a comment at the SRV meeting in there. Where the funds for the special rate variation are applied, it's very, very specific. That was always laid out. I think your question was probably a little loaded that evening, but we can discuss that separately. The maintenance report, I would have handed that to the General Manager. What happened to it after then, where it fit into our Works program, I guess remains to be seen. That can be followed up. The $1.8 million on the first stage of the rail trail, that's not true. That money, you've probably conflated the body of the report with the actual motion. So in the body of the report, there was reference to a funding application, a grant application that was required of $3.6 million, of which 50% was to be co-funded. And that's not part of this motion. It's certainly not part of the first stage of the rail trail. So that's moot. Dogs off leash, I take your point. I'm sure our rangers are onto it. And the final one, lobbying government. I do believe I've been a very effective lobbyer for this region in a lot of different areas, including the rail line, what is happening to that line. And it would have been on the 13th of March, along with my deputy, I had a meeting with the Premier, the Treasurer and the Minister for Regional Transport. I wanted to get clarity about the government's position in regards to the line north of Armidale. And the message was the government has no plans to invest in the restoration of the line or in running passenger services there. So armed with that knowledge, I was comfortable that the council continue to move ahead with the rail trail. And I was further comforted by the legislation, which means if at any point trains are to come back, the legislation is such that that corridor can be used. So I've been a very effective lobbyer for the community as a whole, and I believe I've been very, very fair to all parties in inverted commas. Councillors, any other questions for Mr McCann?
Yeah, Mr McCann, I think I don't know, you were speaking against item 8.1, the cash and investment report. Yeah, just from your comments, I must have missed it. What exactly was your against in regards to those reports? Like looking at the motion and what's written in it. I understand everything you said is well researched on your behalf, but just in regards to being against what's in that motion, what exactly, based on what's written on the papers, were you against?
Well, money has been spent on essential maintenance of infrastructure. That's my point. And that comes back to money. And even though we say that, we're getting grant money from the federal and state governments, it's still taxpayers' money. It's money from people in this room, along with their rates, and I feel it's not being spent wisely. Every morning, or every day, I ride that shared path between my residence and Centennial Close to the shops and to other places, even up to Harvey Norman at times. And there's a lot of rough sections, and my bicycle has been damaged. Got buckle wheels, even the top part of the where the handlebar is, that's attached to the stem. That's worn out and it's loose. So I've got to replace all those things, and people complain about potholes and wrecking the tyres of their vehicles and the suspension. Even the bus, one of the bus drivers at the bus depot told me that the buses are getting suspension damage.
Sorry,
anyway.
Mr McCann, I think we've gone a little bit off piste there. So could you please turn that off for a sec, because we have two. Then Councillor O'Connor wants to ask a question.
Oh, yes, thanks. I also wanted to ask a question of Ms White, if that's possible. I didn't get in quick enough.
Because
sorry.
It's you, of course.
Thank you. But my question to Mr McCann is, Mr McCann, I've seen you around town for many years, and I believe you are somebody who practices active transport in the sense that you walk or ride your bike rather than drive a car.
That's correct.
So you'd be in a position to know intimately, if you like, the state of our bike trails around town.
I certainly do. There's sometimes can't avoid.
Okay, we have to go to a point of order.
Yep. Oh. What?
Could you,
Thank you. Mr Mayor, the question that Councillor Witters asked was, what was the speaking against the cash and investment report, which is a report which notes what money council is holding, restricted or unrestricted, and whether it's invested or not. In terms of banking and interest earned, it's not about the use of those funds, which is the subject of other reports that council comes to. So it's a little clandestine, in my opinion, to come to that answer, and I'd just like to be straight up and down. Point of order's been done, and I don't think the question was answered, Councillor.
thank you.
Just to follow up on that, you're also down to talk about 9.1 as well. Did you roll both your speeches into the one speech?
No. I originally applied to speak 9.1, was told there were already two speakers against the motion, so I decided to do something about what's been concerning me a long time, is the poor maintenance of facilities I use and other people use around town. Council's first and foremost priority is to maintain those facilities. They can't get under that. That's their statutory obligation. It's written in the Local Government Act. So it's mandatory.
Okay.
Mr Mayor, I'm happy to concede Councillor Packham's point.
Thank you.
And I just want to emphasise I haven't discussed anything about this day with Mr McCann at all.
Oh, that's all right. All right. Well, councillors, if there's nothing further in Mr McCann's presentation re item 8.1, the cash and investment report, Mr McCann, I'll ask you to come back up and take your slot to speak against item 9.1, the New England Rail Trail.
Right, well,
And let's stick to that topic.
my speech is in regard to item 9.1, New England Rail Trail, is addressed to all councillors present at this meeting. I have read for the entire 136 pages of the rail trail plan, which forms an attachment to item 9.1 on the agenda for this meeting. One of the matters I noticed there were actually 3 separate documents being presented as one, and I noticed a lot of information was repeated across all 3 documents. Also noticed numerous incorrect facts, inconsistencies, and even some safety issues in the document. So I'll summarise some of those more significant safety issues and errors in the document, which I highlighted, added comments. The document was too large for me to email to other people, so I had to save it, the amended document to a USB drive. I gave it the drive to Councillor O'Connor for printing and distributing to all councillors. Okay, so it comes to safety issues. So there's several matters in the document which impact the safety of rail trail users, including the crossing of Old Inverell Road at the western end of Handel Street, where restricted visibility will increase the risk of a collision between a trail user and a road vehicle. The cottage between the rail track and Booralong Road will restrict both a rail trails user and a driver's view until both are on the crossing. Given the narrow confines of the crossing, then there is very little room for a road vehicle to stop. Chicanes proposed for the crossing will not reduce the risk of a collision due to the restricted visibility. Another safety issue is the location of the proposed trailhead in Armidale. Miller Street is a very busy street, especially during weekdays and reaching a peak when school buses are leaving Edwards bus depot nearby. Large trucks, including concrete trucks, semi-trailers and B-doubles also use Miller Street as well. Some local cyclists, including myself, refer to Miller Street as Suicide Street. That's how dangerous we think it is. The gate off Ampol Street is also used by UGL track inspectors when they come onto and off the active track. As far into the active track, there is insufficient space between the current stop block and the bridge across McCann Street for the trail to safely access the bridge. The section of track between the northernmost turnout and the stop block is required for locomotive hauled trains, including ballast trains, to be turned around. The end of the active track is actually 1 metre beyond the McCann Street bridge, and it's been set up so that if a locomotive hits the stop block and dislodges it, there is somewhere for the locomotive to go, hopefully staying on the rails before it stops. Estimates claiming that the New England Road will come to factual errors and inconsistencies, so only have time for 2 of them. Estimates claiming the railway will cost $2.5 million per kilometre are totally wrong and highly misleading. A recent degradation study in the northern rivers along the sections of track still remaining produced a total cost, including bridges, to be considerably less than what the rail trail's business case had estimated would cost. The $2.5 million per kilometre for the railway north of Armidale to be reopened was derived from a desktop study undertaken by consultants with absolutely no experience in rail engineering. The levels of community support show very low numbers of people actually stated they support the rail trail. Some of the support levels are as low as 0.5% of the total population of the community being surveyed. As far as I'm aware, no proper community consultation has been done at either Glen Innes or Armidale. If there has been a proper consultation, then where are the results? There are many other factual errors, including dubious community benefits and inconsistencies too numerous to mention here today. The entire document needs a complete rewrite. I urge all councillors to vote to defer discussion on the motions in item 9.1 until a new document is compiled. Councillors are reminded their legal responsibilities to ensure the information they may vote on is true and accurate. I've researched options for alternative recreation trails in the northern tablelands, including one which would connect the Armidale Visitor Centre to Merrick Dam, which would be more affordable to build and maintain, as well as providing a more attractive option for local residents to use. I have some maps with me I prepared if anyone wants to see them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCann. Councillors, any questions for Mr. McCann on item 9.1?
Yes, I did have one for the previous speaker, that's all.
Okay. So if there's nothing more, thank you, Mr. McCann. Ms White, if you'd stand up, Councillor O'Connor has a question related to the future fund for you.
Could I just say Mr. McCann has spoken to me about circulating one of his documents to councillors, but I couldn't do it because of the time. What I meant when I said that was I've not discussed his speech, or have your say.
Okay.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Ms White, for waiting. My question is simply that in relation to item 9.5, the New England Future Fund, do you have, you've been listed to speak in support of that. Is that the case, that those are recommendations that are on page 33 of the council agenda papers, which is to endorse the establishment of the New England Future Fund, and it ends with hold a workshop with councillors to look at the sort of mechanics of it. Are you happy with that?
Yes, I would be happy to progress the Future Fund by that negotiating and collaboration, that collaborative process, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. I'd like to call Mr Brian Flint up to speak against item 9.1 being the New England Rail Trail.
Thanks very much,
Excuse me.
I thank the ARC for the invitation to speak on the subject of the future of transport here in the New England. For having come from a three-generational transport company in the region, and as we are approaching a historic point in the industry because of decarbonisation, I am concerned as the economics across the world continue to step up the pace of rail electrification. We need to explore the opportunities it will provide the New England region with the line. They're being reopened going into the future of the transport sector. For as electrification is largely viewed as the gold standard of zero carbon transport solutions, it is also the solution to other parts of the story. We also cannot overlook how the substantial benefits of rail can be amplified through the unique opportunity in renewable integration and energy optimisation. Following on from having low emissions leading up to carbon zero, rail having a greater ability to move larger amounts of both freight and passengers compared to heavy vehicles, cars and buses and aeroplanes amounts to a potential reduction in not only the amount of vehicles on the roads, it reduces the dependence on continually building more of them. Trains having the capacity to move up to 50,000 passengers per hour, cars on a motorway 2,500 per hour. In moving 1,000 passengers, train requires 8 carriages, whereas 20 buses would be needed and cars anywhere from 250 to 1,000. In regards to freight, they can easily replace 50 trucks or more. Besides all the savings to be gained from reducing road traffic, one is 200 times safer travelling by rail. Road trauma is responsible for up to 15% of emergency call-outs. The cost of it all amounting to 30 billion annually. Looking from that perspective, going into the future, if we continue to go down that track of just focusing on building more and more roads in the country, when cities are aligning themselves to discourage road traffic by expanding their rail networks as a means in overcoming vehicle issues, we are just going to have to follow suit. Otherwise, the gap will widen in gaining access to them, along with the difficulties that face the electrification of the transport sector. Rail and its avenues, regardless of their present condition and usage, will be in the foreseeable future be of enormous value, particularly going into a zero carbon transport future, and must be preserved at all costs, not only for what we have spoke of here so far, but as a nation-building exercise that must begin now in readiness, not in 40 years' time, and an affordable public transport and freight system that the entire country will benefit from. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flint. Councillors, any questions, Mr. Flint? I just have one. I have a couple, but should freight be returned to the Northern Corridor? What is your estimation of the timeline for that to occur once all the appropriate studies have been done, the funding has been sourced, and the massive construction effort? Because for it to be relevant, it would need to go to the Port of Brisbane, I imagine, not start at Wallangarra.
Yes, well, the basis of my argument is that we're moving into the future, and the future requires that the same in this country as every other country to develop networks that will provide a rail system. And those rail systems will be interconnected and as such that will allow freight as well as public transport. So it's a timeline for when it's something we need to start preparing for. It's not just a case of getting the New England Rail, the Great Northern Line back into service. It's more of a case of us combining with the rest of the country in developing a network. And that's where I'm coming from. If we don't retain the Great Northern Line, we could very well miss out on being connected to a network. Once this network is up and running, obviously there will be more call for the movement of freight on it. But the thing is, we're moving into decarbonisation. And what I've just said about just staying the way we are and just relying on roads, we're going to end up that we're going to have to be continually build more and more and more roads. And so years ago, the rail did most of it. Then it went back onto roads. Now we're in the position where we are because of that happening. But it's going to go back the other way. The simple reason is rail is going to be needed very much to make up for all the problems that are associated with the electrification of roads. So it's a balancing act, and I think we need to look at that very seriously rather than just go and chop up the railway, and we need to plan the future as such, where we're going to have a combination of both rail and road. That's how I see it anyway.
Thank you. So is there anything that would prohibit, if it's something that's required in 40 years' time, and let's say, even optimistically, we're a 20-year build, we can't think of this a bit longitudinally. We can use the line or that corridor for recreation and amenity purposes for a 20-year period. Then after that, all of that planning can come into place, and if the government decides that it's appropriate, and it could be state or federal, decide that it's appropriate to reintroduce trains, whether it's freight or passenger, that could then happen. So we need to think sequentially, not absolutely.
Well, the government at the moment is doing a roadmap for the future for the transport industry and how it's going to cope with electrification. Now, I know what the result was when you spoke to the minister the other day, but you've got to look at it at this point, that if the government decide that, okay, the rail networks needs to develop to this extent, and the road network in that extent, and it's a balancing act. I don't think we should even look at touching the line until the government come up with this roadmap. Because, as you say, if you dig up the railway and you put in the bike track, and it's going to cost a lot of money, down the track, I mean, whether it's 10 or more years, all that money has gone to waste. So I think we should be thinking in that line that if we're going to spend a lot of money, we don't want to waste it. Let's put it into something like they're talking about maybe just building one out to Jumeric Dam, which would probably be just as successful as this one up there and costing 10 times less. But then I just can't see the point in going out to Jumeric at the moment. It's not going to achieve a jolly thing. No one is going to ride it. It's a waste of money. And if they do come up with a plan not to do it, why have you done it? You know, it's just, I just can't see the common sense in wasting money in the first place. If you know, we've got a thought that it's every possibility the rail is going to have to come back.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Witters.
Brian, just listening to you there, and I don't know where the line goes from Wollongara onwards. Does it go from Wollongara to Toowoomba?
Yep.
So, and some of the older councillors here might remember this. I remember a few years back, maybe six years back, we were talking about how Toowoomba was now becoming a major port through aerial stuff like that. Do you, again with the network that you talked about, do you see that as a viable option if a Great Northern Line is coming? Yeah.
And of course they're working on putting a much improved rail line from Toowoomba down to Brisbane now. So, I mean, we've got the Olympic Games on in Brisbane in 8 years' time. I mean, here we are, the 21st century, and we can't even get to Brisbane by train. It's just, Australia is so far behind. I mean, if you go to the other side of the world, I mean, when I worked and lived in England, now you can just hop on a train in Euston and you're in Euston Station, in Paris Station in a matter of a couple of hours. I mean, we've got to lift our game. I think that just to say, well, maybe this and maybe that, but the reality is that we've got to become an international standard with our transport system. And I think that whatever we decide on, we've got to be very careful how we look at this. Otherwise, in 40 years' time, if we leave it, if we don't push the issue, we've got to push the issue. If we don't push the issue, what's going to happen? We're going to be so far behind in Armidale. Look, in 1968, I'll tell you a story.
Well, we might just... No.
In 1968, the then Deputy Mayor of Armidale, we had water. Industry wanted to come to Armidale. Now, this is very important. This is very important. This is the reason we're in the trouble with what we are. Industry wanted to come to Armidale. Tamworth and Toowoomba and Armidale are all the same size. Tamworth and Toowoomba didn't have water. Industry wanted to come to Armidale, had water. They had everything else. The then Deputy Mayor of Armidale, Dr. John Fales, stood there on the third page of the Armidale Express in 1968. We do not want industry in Armidale. Okay, well, that was a great plan, wasn't it? Where is it now? It's in Tamworth, it's in Toowoomba. Tamworth's is 60,000, Toowoomba's 120,000. Now, if we're going to wait for another 40 years, God help us.
Deputy mayors do that sort of thing. All right. Thank you, Mr. Flint. I'll call Matthew Tenny forward, please, to speak against item 9.1.
Thank you. I hope that councillors have got access to the New England Connection brochures that were distributed, and I thank you for letting me speak. The proposal to destroy the railway track north of Armidale and replace it with a bicycle path has been dividing opinion in this community for a decade. Until today's motion appeared, we could at least appreciate one another's point of view. The Otago Central Rail Trail in New Zealand, I enjoyed it with the family in January, by the way, was the inspiration for the New England Rail Trail. I think our railway line is too valuable a public asset to be sacrificed to a nice recreational project of narrower benefit. Well, we can safely disagree about that. But the proposal before Council today at item 9.1 is quite different, sprung upon us and sure to leave a legacy of bitterness and resentment. Armidale to Dunmarrick is not really a rail trail at all, not in the manner of the New England Rail Trail proposal, guaranteed not to attract outside visitors, devoid of any of the economic benefits that have been so bravely forecast, because it would be used only by a few locals. It will mutilate the Main North Railway by dismantling a tiny 9-kilometre stretch while consuming more than $5 million of government funds without any significant benefit for this community. It could only be justified if Council were certain of receiving the astonishing additional sums of money listed in the applications on page 17 of the agenda. And that includes the need for Armidale's ratepayers to kick the tin for $1,800,000 as a co-contribution. I'm not confident that those grants will come through, though a State Treasurer might fork out $23 million to encourage a gullible council to take on the maintenance burden of a long railway corridor for 30 years. Whether you like the real rail trail concept or not, I'm just appealing to Council not to proceed with this harmony-shattering asset grab of a pretend rail trail and look to something else around which we can all unite. Perhaps apply for a grant for the cycle paths to Dunmarrick Dam or Blue Hole, or for the active transport links shown in the new LSPS. The hydrotherapy pool has been suggested as much more worthy. I leave it with you, please, to make a better choice. Meanwhile, we at Trains North are still harping on about the prospect of trains running. We haven't accepted the refrain that the state government has no intention of operating trains north of Armidale for 30 years, nor its sister slogan that it's a choice between blackberries or bicycles. We've got lots of reasons for valuing this railway asset, including the local ones, of keeping the line available for local freight carriers, heritage train operators, etc. Most of all, we are pressing on because the prospect of the Main North Line being investigated for reactivation as an interstate railway has never been greater than it is today. The state government's own correspondence gives a pointer. Here's a good example of a letter from the Minister for Regional Transport, in this case about our big petition that we took down there. What does it say? The corridor, that's our line, was considered extensively to be reopened as part of the planning and business case for the Inland Rail. However, it was ruled out by the Australian government. The state government takes its lead from Canberra when it comes to lines that are of cross-border significance, and no mothballed line is of greater interstate significance than ours. Her reference to planning of inland rail is really to the North-South Rail Corridor Study of 2006 for DOTARS, a federal government department. You'll see it in the references on the back page of the coloured brochure, The New England Connection, which you've all got. Over the past few months, the captains of freight logistics in Australia have come to realise that they are likely to retire and grow old before they see their containers carried north of Parkes by rail
30 seconds.
on the Inland Rail project to Queensland, and they are looking for a solution at the national level. The CEO of Inland Rail said that it's not stalled, but the member for New England said that it's been kicked into the long grass. I think he had it right. Please look at the introductory New England Connection brochure. The Main North Line is back on the table, out of the waste paper basket, ready for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tenny. Councillors, any questions for Mr. Tenny? Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yes, Councillor Redwood.
Hand up. Thank you. Mr. Tenny, sorry, I didn't receive your brochure, so maybe that's why I'm not understanding what the benefit of an empty rail corridor is at the moment to the community. I would have thought that the benefit of something on there was better than nothing, but perhaps your brochure must have been in paper format. Was it, or was it electronically sent? Oh, okay. All right. So I just didn't receive that one, so maybe that's why I'm ill-informed of the benefit. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry that it wasn't sent to you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I would welcome a question like the ones that were given to Mr. Flint.
I think, thank you, Gallery. No, it's this is really the forum for the councillors to ask the questions. So thank you. Thanks very much, Mr. Tenny. I'll now like to call Mr. John Hawthorne to come forward, and Mr. Hawthorne will be speaking for item 9.1, the New England Rail Trail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for the opportunity to reflect on my experience of social cycling and the benefits that I see in the New England Rail Trail. First of all, a bit of an introduction of myself. My name's John Hawthorne. I teach at O'Connor Catholic College in Armidale, and I've lived in Armidale for 35 years. My wife reminds me constantly that I'm not actually a local, but I'm hoping to get there someday. Over that, half of that 35 years that I've been in Armidale, I spent running around on rugby fields as a player or a coach and a referee. And so it obviously took its toll on my knees over the years. Obviously now I can't participate in exercise that I would normally do, such as running and playing touch football that I loved. 13 years ago, I was invited by the rugby club to go to a Tour de Rocks meeting to start the inaugural Tour de Rocks, which is for those people that ride from Armidale to Kempsey. I said there is no way that I could possibly do such a thing. But I put my hand up and I did it, and basically I've been riding ever since. We now formed a little club called the Quabbers. Quabbers, C-W-O-B, is cruising without bruising. So our members are about riding the trails and the paths around New England in a little social group. Our demographic is basically ages 32 to 72, both male and female. Unfortunately, or fortunately, most of those are current teachers or ex-teachers. And as you can imagine, we try to solve many of the problems of the world on those rides. We have become confused and frustrated at times, as I am now, about some of the arguments about the New England Rail Trail and getting it up and going. As teachers, one of the things we've discussed is a declining physical activity of teenagers. To look up a few facts of that, the Australian Bureau of Statistics is saying that 1 in 20, that's 5% of teenagers are not meeting the advised physical activity guidelines. That is awful. Adults are a little bit better. They are 1 in 5. That's 20%, again, are not meeting the advised guidelines from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. For us, another learning of Quabbers has been that it's just as much benefit to the head as it is to the legs. It really is great for our mental health, just as much as our physical health. I look forward also as a teacher for the opportunity to take student groups in a safe environment to ride on a thing such as the rail trail. It will be a great activity that we will be able to do, because I think we really do need to do more to keep our kids off screens. On the recent Tour de Rocks, another learning that I had was the amount of older riders using e-bikes. It was amazing. Previously, we would not have seen that demographic being able to get out and enjoy the beautiful surroundings of our environment, as well as doing some physical activity. An example of tourism, of how it benefits tourism, is again from our own Tour de Rocks experience. We had 17 riders in our little group. 3 of those riders came from Noosa. They learned about the Tour de Rocks on a tour trail or rail trail in Vietnam with one of our members. They stayed in Armidale for 5 nights, 2 before, 3 afterwards, on their way to the Central West Rail Trail. They loved riding in our particular environment that we have here in Armidale. So my points generally about the rail trail is that it is a positive promotion of both mental and physical health of all in our community. And as I said, very important to get our youth out and about doing things. I also see the advantages of allowing people of all abilities in research of rail trails, people with reasons why they can't particularly engage in physical exercise, be it age or other sort of abilities, that will allow them to also take on recreational activities. And as I said before, to promote tourism opportunities, I think there is a great opportunity in doing that. Thank you once again for letting me express that.
Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. The questions will come from the councillors if there are any. Councillor Widders.
Yes, John, I think a few of my old work colleagues might be part of your Quabbers group. I think I might have even saw you guys out at Generic Dam the other day. So that was good. Yes, I've got a question. And you spoke, and I think I back you up 100% in regards to physical health. I think kids need to get out and be more active, and so do adults, to be honest. There is a theory that 95% of adults never run again after the age of 25. And I think it's a shame. I think we're sit still too much in our life. My question is, though, in your speech sort of spoke about the benefits of a full line, and I think it's exactly right. This motion up today is not about a full line, it's about a 9 to 10K section of it, which is on a fairly flat sort of trajectory. My question for you, based on what you said, is how will, and knowing some of the other tracks that we've got, like from, say, if you ride from the Pine Forest out to the uni, you can ride through the Pine Forest and out to the university, and you've got all that sort of thing on one big track. How will a flat 9 to 10 kilometre section on the railway line add to the experience of current and future Quabbers that we don't already have? Is my question to you.
Okay, I think the main one is to keep it, if we can keep riders off the road as much as possible, that's a great thing. As I mentioned, as a school teacher, with risk assessments these days, it would almost be impossible to organise a ride of some length. Say, for example, to Demeric Dam, and hopefully that would be able to connect to Demeric Dam, because risk assessment would make it just too dangerous to do so. If you could ensure that you have a safe travel, such as a rail trail would offer, then I think that's a really good start. I actually do see that this would be a start of a much longer rail trail, and you have to start somewhere.
Thank you. Councillor McMichael.
Equally, your point about physical activity and biking would go towards ordinary bike trails around the city and the region rather than just a rail trail, wouldn't it?
I suppose so, but I'm here just talking about that particular point today. I would welcome any funding for any type of bike path, but I see this funding being vitally important in that step of getting us towards, hopefully, a rail trail right through.
Right, no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. I'd now like to ask Mr. David Boundy to come up and he's speaking for item 9.1, the New England Rail Trail.
Thanks, Mayor. I've watched with interest and with the ongoing social media campaigns, the press releases, and listened to the dialogue both for and against the proposed rail trail, sometimes very negative. Last year, I and 9 lovely ladies rode the Otago Rail Trail. I had the privilege to meet Alison and Graham Duncan, 4th generation farmers from Wedderburn. The rail trail runs right through the middle of their property. I asked them what they thought about the rail trail. They said 20 years ago they were totally opposed to it. In fact, they headed up a committee to stop it. I then asked why were you against it. They said due to noxious weeds transfer, the cost to the local council, young mountain bike riders causing havoc along the route, theft from their property, inability to graze stock along the trail, nobody would use it. It would be only used for elite cyclists and not the general public. It will be expensive to maintain. And who would use a rail trail in the coldest areas in New Zealand? These are the exact same reasons that some certain people would have you believe regarding the Armidale Rail Trail. Both Allison and Graham actively campaigned against it for all those reasons. They showed us videos of them talking to the national TV stations, clipping from local papers, etc., in an attempt to stop the rail trail from going ahead. I then asked, what are your impressions now? They said that they're the first to admit that they were totally wrong. In fact, they stated it is the best thing that's ever happened to the local communities along the way. It has revitalised each and every local government area it runs through. They went on to say that the people that use it are mostly middle-aged people with disposable incomes and want to spend money. They're not necessarily cyclists, but outdoor enthusiasts looking for a healthier lifestyle. With the advent of e-bikes, it enables persons of all ages to ride long distances with ease. In fact, tens of thousands use this rail trail each year. I'm sure Alison and Graham would be happy for me to pass on the details so they can personally tell anyone that is interested the truth. In all due respect to those opposing the rail trail, I would have felt this could be a win-win situation for both parties. The yes side would get the trail, the no side gets to showcase the world the history of the railway line from Armidale. The disused railway stations could become museums and showcase the history and the pioneers that built the line. On the 4th of June 1943 near Hyde, the worst train disaster in New Zealand history happened. 21 lives lost, 47 injured. There's a memorial to these people right beside the rail trail where this happened. Thousands of people each year stop and pay their respects. There would only be a select few that would have ever visited this memorial if it wasn't for the rail trail. What really concerns me is the loss to the community if the rail trail does not go ahead. We would lose the opportunity to preserve our rail history. We would lose the opportunity to create an active connectivity around our city, towns and villages, lose the opportunity to build social and healthy lifestyle for all ages, and lose the opportunity to see millions of dollars flow into this region. Rail trails are proven economic drivers, and here is our chance to support this project through to construction. Each year, Tour de Rocks runs a charity ride from Armidale to the coast. It takes 12 months to organise. We have to get approval from 4 local councils, Roads and Traffic Authority and the Police Department. The event has raised over $3 million for cancer research, prevention and cure. Imagine having a rail trail and being able to run multiple events each year without the approval process holding us up. Armidale could be the fundraising capital of the world for cancer prevention and cure. The one thing in life that is certain, besides death and taxes, is change. The council needs to embrace change, or otherwise Armidale region will be left behind. The measure of one's intelligence is the ability to accept change, embrace change, and don't let change scare you. People are afraid of the uncertainty that change forces upon their lives. The hardest part of change is making the decision in the first place. Once you have made it, you then feel somewhat empowered. Progress will not happen without change. I now ask the councillors that may be against the rail trail to take on board the remarks that Alison and Graham Duncan, 4th generation farmers from New Zealand, made some 20 years ago, and not to repeat the same mistakes. The million-dollar question that now needs to be asked is, can Armidale really afford not to seize this opportunity and, above all, make that change? Thank you.
Councillor Witters.
Yep, thanks, Dave. Listening to your speech there again, and again, it's about what's on the table today. Again, you spoke about like what the benefits of a full rail trail from our section, which goes from here to Ben Lomond, and it reminds me of some of my concerns from before about what else comes with the rail trail, like besides the rail trail. And you spoke about tourism and a few other different things, and I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago we passed a motion around farm stays from memory, which I thought in the end it sort of pushed me towards a rail trail because there's a secondary thing that we can use the rail trail for. What's on the table today though is, as I mentioned earlier, is a 9 to 10 kilometre section. That's what we're deciding on. What do you see as the tourist benefits for Armidale and for the Armidale Regional Council area within that 9 to 10 kilometre section between Armidale Station and Generic Station? What tourism benefits do you see bringing people to the... Because we might be waiting 5, 10, 20 years for extra funding to finish the line, finish the rail trail if we say, yes, let's do it. So it could only be that 9, 10 kilometre section for a long time. So in the interim, what do you see as someone who's done these sorts of things as the big tourist drivers between here and Generic Station?
Brad, look, I think there's been so much negativity around this rail trail for so long. I think that first 9 kilometres or whatever it is shows that Armidale has a positive attitude towards change, and I think you'll see the benefits of that flow on. Just a matter of interest with the Tour de Rocks, we always, when we started that ride, we had no idea that it would last for 12 years. We were always worried about the sustainability of that ride. We were drawing on the local community, the local businesses to sponsor it. Now, over 50% of the 500 people that we take on that ride are from outside this local government area. It just goes to show that I think a lot of people underestimate the ability and the passion that a lot of cyclists have and people from outdoors will have. They'll see this as such a positive thing going on in Armidale that I could dare say that it will bring people. Don't worry about that.
Thank you. Right, thank you, Mr. Boundy. I'd like to ask our last speaker up, Mr. Peter Sneekes, who is speaking for item 9.1, the New England Rail Trail.
Good afternoon to councillors, executives and the good people in the gallery today. My name is Peter Sneekes. I have helped in a very small way to help facilitate the development of the New England Rail Trail project over the last 10 years. This was in my role with Regional New South Wales as Business Development Manager for the region. I am now retired. I'm an advocate for this project. I'm pleased to speak in support of the motion being put to Council today, and that is to commence construction of the first stage of the New England Rail Trail. First, hats off to the many community representatives, many of whom are here today, who conceptualised this project as far back as 2000, when Richard Torbay and Guyra councillor Shane Davidson first introduced the project in New South Wales Parliament. It's been a long, long haul since then, and I congratulate everybody involved who have been meticulous and persistent to get the project to the current shovel-ready stage and with such glowing credentials. And the support of the community has been fantastic, both private and corporate, and in raising over $45,000 themselves to put in place the required developmental plans and business cases to progress this project, and of course support from councils in repeatedly contributing to and voting for progress of the rail trail. To kick off, fact. As the Mayor just outlined earlier, we all know that for the foreseeable future, and after 35 years since the last regular services, trains will not be returning to north of Armidale anytime soon. This has been formally advised time and time again in writing by successive transport ministers and by Transport for New South Wales. There is no alternative viable project other than a rail trail on this corridor at the moment. It is a rail trail or continuing corridor decay. However, even after the rail trail is built, as pointed out, it will no way stop a train being reinstated on that corridor should that ever become viable. The legislation is clear. The rail trail project business cases have been well developed and have been analysed and evaluated by Treasury economists at both state and federal government levels on numerous occasions. The business cases have been judged to be realistic, evidence-based, deliverable and compelling, and so worthy of providing over $14 million worth of grant funding to date toward construction of the total project from Armidale to Glen Innes. This means the project has stood up well competitively against other projects in regional New South Wales vying for those same funds. And let's make no bones about it. This funding is fit for purpose only. If we don't use the funding for this project, it cannot be used for any alternative activities. It will be lost forever, it will go back to government and end up elsewhere, and Armidale will once again be left behind. This rail trail project has been recognised, identified and marked as a priority action in every local, community and regional plan in the region over the last 8 years. From local strategic and action plans to the regional economic development strategies for both southern and northern New England. Each of those plans come with significant community consultation and support built in. This is one fundamental requirement for funding. It's called strategic alignment. Tick. To not support the project now would mean not supporting every plan that Council has been engaged in developing over the last 8 years. For funding, the rail trail proposal had to also demonstrate enduring positive economic benefit and viability and a positive benefit cost ratio. Again, tick. And no, numbers in the business case were not plucked out of the air, as some may assert. They were evidence and hard research based. Regional Development Australia Northern Inland has done a sterling job on the business cases and should be congratulated, not vilified. The rail trail had to demonstrate deliverability and affordability of the project. Tick. Again, evaluated and tested by Treasury economists. It had to demonstrate community participation and support. Tick. This project has and always will be a community-initiated concept, co-designed with relevant councils and community groups. Let's cut to the chase here. When the Rail Trail Committee visited then Transport Minister Gladys Berejiklian over 6 years ago and asked her and her department for advice as to how to progress this project, she presented a set of steps required. The New England Rail Trail Committee, in conjunction with councils and the community, followed that list to the letter, and as a result, so far been offered over $14 million in grant funding. In conclusion, the New England Rail Trail is more than just a transformational project for the region. It's a symbol of progress, connectivity and community spirit. By commencing construction, we not only honour our past but also pave the way for a revitalised future. I want to see New England at the forefront of New South Wales regional development, not languishing behind other towns and always missing out. The rail trail will deliver a host of business and economic opportunities for Armidale. It will generate new business. It will create new jobs. It will attract new visitors to the region, many of whom may then consider moving here for an active lifestyle choice. And many may set up their own new businesses here. It will provide something new, something different. And most importantly, we will attract significant tourism dollars. I urge all councillors to support this motion and join hands in finally bringing this exciting vision to life. Together, let's build a legacy that future generations will be proud of. A vote for this motion is a vote for business growth, job creation, a vibrant community and a brighter future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Witters.
Yeah, a couple of things, Pete. Thank you for that. Would it be fair for me to say that when you said it was fact, could I say it was more that fact than opinion? Because I'm sure there's people in the room that would disagree with it being fact. And second question is, a bit along my last questioning to Dave, you mentioned that it will bring tourism, will bring jobs. Can you give us an example of some of those things that this proposal that's up today, the 9 to 10 kilometre track, because that's what we're dealing with, and that's what we have to vote on. Can you give me an example on some of the things you expect would come out of this being approved?
Well, initially, even during the construction phase, such an injection of non-discretionary capital from the government into an area, and I'm combining the Glenninnis $8.7 million as well for their section that they will be building from Glenninnis to Ben Lomond. That money will be spent here, it'll be spent on local businesses, it'll be spent in the community, and that money will multiply through that local economy. So you get first round economic effects of the expenditure on the infrastructure. The kind of jobs that once the rail trail is fully operational, by attracting tourists, families, cyclists and outdoor enthusiasts, it will create businesses from cafes to accommodation and hospitality providers. Everyone stands to benefit from the increased tourism and spending. One example in the Rosewood to Tumbarumba rail trail down south, it's only a 20-kilometre rail trail. the hardware store there reported a doubling in their revenue and had to double the size of their airport, simply because a lot of the people who come to their rail trail all of a sudden have to fix their bikes and buy some screwdrivers or whatever. And it's just been right across the sector. The question of the 9 kilometre section delivering the full benefits. The first 9 kilometre section will be stage 1. Stage 2 will be Glen Innes to Ben Lomond. There are funding applications in to complete the rest of the trail. And believe me, once people start coming, and they will come to ride that short section, and they'll also come to ride the short section from Glen Innes to Ben Lomond, we only got to fill the gap and the world will be our oyster.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Sneekes. Well, that brings us to the end of the Have Your Say. Thank you very much, speakers. Thank you very much, gallery, as well, for your patience, your consideration, and your really fair interaction as well. Thank you. We'll have a 5-minute break, councillors, and we will resume the ordinary council meeting at 4:46.